Welcome everyone to the regular meeting of the Halifax Water Board held on Thursday, September 26, 2024. We have an agenda as presented. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Commissioner Russell has supported that motion and Commissioner McClellan has seconded. Oh,
okay.
Any amendments or additions? I just had one information item, 6I, the Pockwalk Boil Order Advisory Investigation. The board had recommended that as part of the regular agenda, so we're going to make that item 7. The end of the agenda. Commissioner Russell, do you support that amendment?
Yes.
Commissioner McClellan?
Same, yes.
Yes, all those in favor of the agenda as amended, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Item 1A, we have ratification of the in-camera motions. I don't believe we had any. Oh, we did the minutes. Okay. Can I have somebody make that motion?
I can make that motion, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Vice Chair Diggle-Gammon.
I can't actually see it.
Oh,
We need that enlarged for those eyes, those of us with.
thank you. Thank you, Kara. Go ahead, Vice Chair Diggle-Gammon.
Okay. Motion that the Halifax Water Board ratified in-camera motions.
Commissioner Kent will second.
Second, yeah.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Or took care 1B. Item 2B, approval of minutes of the regular meeting held on Thursday, June 20th, 2024. I have a motion to be put on the floor.
I'll move that. I move that Halifax Water Board approve the minutes of the June 20th, 2024 regular meeting.
I can second.
Thank you, Commissioner Kent, seconded by Vice Chair Diggle-Gammon. Any amendments or changes to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. I did not see any business arising from the minutes. Did you, Kenda?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Moving on, item 4.1, operating results as of July 31st, 2024.
Happy to provide additional information. So the report that was before you went to the Audit and Finance meeting in early September. We're providing additional information here. What we have is our details to the end financial reports up until the end of July. Key things I always point out, we continue to have a healthy cash balance. At the end of July, we had approximately $40 million in the bank. I confirmed this morning we currently have around $47 million in the bank, so a healthy cash balance at this point. The other piece that I highlight is as of the end of July, we were tracking to have an operating deficit of approximately $5,200,000. The board approved an operating budget with a deficit of $18.7 million. So essentially, we are on track to come in at that number. What I did want to point out is in terms of the services, on the water side, the deficit is approximately $5.8 million. A bit surprisingly at this point, the wastewater side has a surplus of approximately 1 million, and the stormwater side of the business has a deficit of about $400,000. So tracking there to get to the about $18 million as of the end of July, but we continue to monitor the differences by the various services. And happy to answer any other questions people may have.
Thank you, Louis. Any questions from the commissioners for Louis? Go ahead, Commissioner McPherson.
Thank you. Louis, just a couple questions on things I didn't quite understand. In the operating results memo at page 2 or page 36 of the of Diligent, under assets, it refers to Halifax Regional Municipality, and that's increased by, I think, 37%. What is that?
That would be, it's usually cost sharing that we do on our capital projects. So as you know, sometimes the municipality leads the procurement or the project and we contribute to them. So it's usually that. Other times we would be the lead and the municipality would owe us money. So that receivable number at times switches from a receivable to the payable, but that's the primary issue.
Okay, thanks. And the second question is under liabilities. There are non-trade liabilities, and they appear, if I'm reading it correctly, to have increased by about 100%. I was wondering what they were, and if at this point you had at your fingertips an explanation for the increase.
I don't know if Michelle Bennett or Alicia is on the call. They may have the specifics. If they're not, John, we'd be happy to provide. I don't know off the top of my head.
No, and that's fair enough. It certainly is a little bit in the weeds detail. So if you could do that offline, that'd be great.
Okay, we'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis and Commissioner McPherson. Any other questions on the operating results as of July 31st, 2024? Moving on, item 4.2, capital expenditures as of July 31st, 2024.
Again, I can do an update on this. What we provide is a brief summary of where our capital spend has been to date, to the end of July. In terms of our active projects, they have a total budget of about $358 million. Before the end of the year, March 31st, 2024, we had spent almost $113 million, which had an opening budget for the fiscal year in terms of our approved budget at about $100 million. We added our capital approval from the board, our 24-25 capital budget of approximately $147 million. So all in total, we have $358 million in approved budget for our active projects. As I mentioned, we spent 112 before the end of the fiscal year, March 31st, 2024. We have, as of the end of July, spent a further $25 million, which leaves a remaining budget that's been approved by the Halifax Water Board of approximately $221 million available to be spent. And with that, if there's any additional questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Louis. Any questions from the board on the information provided under item 4.2? Okay, thank you, Louis. Moving on, I think you're still up, but 4.3, I have a motion to be put on the floor about the fall 2024 debenture.
I can move that. If you would like, Madam Chair.
Yes, please, go ahead, read the motion.
Okay, I move that the Halifax Water Board I'm just going to read it from there. One, approved financing of $65 million with a 30-year amortization term and finance over 10 years. The maximum all-inclusive rate is not to exceed 6.5%. And two, approve the refinancing of $14,080,529 with a 10-year amortization term and financing over 10 years with an all-inclusive rate not to exceed 6.5%.
I can second that.
Vice Chair Diego Gammon is seconded.
Thank you.
We'll
do
go,
have-
we'll go over to Louis for any further context.
So in the 24-25 budget, the board approved the issuance of $80 million in new debt. We have previously, in the last debenture issue, the board approved 15 million. So this is the remaining $65 million. We continue to manage and monitor our cash position. We continue to manage and monitor our expenditures in terms of our operating costs and our capital expenditures. And we've determined that the $65 million is required. As always, as if our operating costs and or our capital spend is not as significant as we thought, we may have a little bit of extra cash in the bank come the end of the year. But right now, we estimate that we will need the $65 million.
Thank you, Louis. Commissioner Russell?
Thank you very much. You have this as being borrowed from the Nova Scotia Finance and Treasury Board Municipal Finance Division. Is that the only place that you can borrow funds? One of the things that HRM has recently done is also look to the Canadian Infrastructure Bank to see about borrowing funds there, and then we would at least have other options potentially with lower interest rate. So I'm just wondering if that has been investigated by Halifax Water at all.
Yes, we did. We did speak to some of the players that, as you referenced, when we talked about the size of the borrowings that we make, they were looking for investments that were double or triple or quadruple the size of what we were looking for and what they were prepared to invest in. We have talked as well with the municipality to see if there's any ways that we can combine some of our spend to allow us to bore through them as well. So we continue to investigate, but currently this is our only option at this point.
Okay. If somebody like the Canadian Infrastructure Bank becomes appealing or becomes accepting of this, would it need to come back to the board to say they are an allowed borrower or an allowed lender, I guess it is?
We would have to investigate that further. My understanding right now, they are the Department of Finance is through the provincial government is the only approved borrower or lender from our perspective. So we'd investigate it, and if we were required to come back, we absolutely would come back.
Thank you very much.
I feel like Commissioner O'Toole wants to weigh on this. Go ahead.
Thank you. Our conversations with the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, which are fairly active, indicates that the municipality would have to sign the agreement and do the borrowing through the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, and then would do a loan to Halifax Water. So that would be consistent with how some borrowing has been done in the past. For example, around Harbor Solutions project, I think there was one piece that worked like that. But as Louis pointed out, the thresholds are really high for the Canada Infrastructure Bank. So we would have to be bundling municipality and Halifax Water projects together. It most likely lends itself to infrastructure for new master plan areas, perhaps, or to some of the work that we're doing to support the new housing within the municipality. And so council gave us approval that we can borrow with the Canada Infrastructure Bank without having to go back to council with agreements. That happened in September. So as part of our planning, long-range infrastructure planning for next year's capital budget and future years' capital budgets, we're certainly open to having discussions with Halifax Water on whether they see projects that we can bundle up with some of our initiatives. So collectively, we can borrow through the Canada Infrastructure Bank.
Thank you. I didn't recollect that there was a floor, if you will, of how much money would be required to be borrowed from them. So it's thank you for that reminder.
Any further discussion or questions for Louis from the board? Okay, we'll call for the vote. Motion remains on the floor that you see on your screen. All those in favor say aye.
I,
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Okay, so we have item 4.4, capital project spending, and I feel like we may have a motion. So there's a motion to be put on the floor for item 4.4. If someone could support that motion and read it from the chat.
Madam Chair, I think I see it in the report itself.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
see it on the agenda. And this is the capital project spending summary.
That's right.
So it's recommended that the Halifax Water Audit and Finance Committee recommend to the Halifax Water Board approve for filing with the NSUARB the capital project spending summary for the period of April 1st, 2023 to March 31st, 2024, and the capital project spending over 1 million summary for the period April 1, 2023 and March 31st, 2024. So maybe.
So I think
I think
it's
I
point
think
of
I
order.
I think I read the wrong motion. Sorry.
So may I, my apologies, when we moved the report from audit and finance to the board, the motion should have been adjusted slightly to say just the board approve, or
I think I have that
so-
one now, Louis.
and I think that is what we were trying to put into the into the chat.
Go ahead, Vice Chair.
So it says it's recommended the Halifax Water Board approve for filing with the NSUARB the capital project spending summary for the period of April 1, 2023 to March 31st, 2024, and the capital project spending over 1 million summary for the period of April 1, 2023 to March 31st, 2024.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I can second that.
Oh, Commissioner McClellan beat you to it.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
have a
Any? Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Kent.
Thank you. I'm just trying to follow the motion. Where are we? Where is it that she just read that? I'm following.
So Lorna posted it in the chat.
Gotcha. Okay, good. That's what I
So
lost.
that helped us get through. And then as Vice Chair Deagle Gammon mentioned, it's in the reports, but it was
Yes.
phrased for the
That's-
audit finance. Is that okay?
Okay, good. Thank you.
Commissioner Russell?
Thank you very much. I'm just wondering how much of the work in this list was as a result of the flood from last year, and is there any remaining work related to the flood of last year? That's thing one. Thing two is I'm wondering if any work is going on planning for the anticipated population growth that we are expecting, or that we have been in the middle of, and targeting basically doubling the system capacity over the next 40 years.
So I can start with the first part. On, I believe it's page 2 of 3 of the attachments. Right near the bottom, the report is done by water, wastewater, stormwater. The bottom part of that document has a group of about 6 different projects that were above the budget. So that gives you a sense of the magnitude of what we spent, primarily around culverts, et cetera, related to the flood.
And there was one pump station that was severely damaged during the flood that we had to basically rebuild. So that was the Farmer's Dairy one, if people remember us having to put out notices about that in the downstream area. So that captures yeah, no worries. That captures the impacts from the flood. Going to the development impact question, that has a couple of prongs to that one. So we have our old 2019 infrastructure master plan that has a list of projects that would be triggered by growth. And of course, that was built off and forecasted for the next 30 years based on the growth projections at the time. We are about to embark on our update to that. We have a 5-year cycle to do that. And so we will be updating the infrastructure lists accordingly for a future looking for the next 30 years. However, in the meantime, we are looking at our current projects, having the conversations with HRM's planning teams, both at more of a master planned area and both at the future outward looking regional plan level, and incorporating into some of the near term design some known growth projections and factors into the current design projects. We are going to be updating our regional development charge, and that's a coming slide on some of these projects so that we're collecting money on the regional aspects. I do want to note that we're trying right now to get an idea and order of magnitude of any of the approved or enabled infilling along some of our known existing communities and what the impacts are on some of those infrastructure pieces. And how do we plan for some of those? Because programs such as backyard suites or intensification on existing properties to enable 4 units, that's difficult to plan for. So the teams are starting to work out, how do we track that? How do we try and anticipate where some of that's going to go, and how do we plan for any near-term infrastructure requirements going forward? So we are, in a bit of a reactionary, but staff are taking those into consideration from a bigger picture. And there has been an uptake in some of those programs, but we're at the point where we're still, we haven't seen any severe impacts from that or anything like that at this point.
Okay, so that addresses things at the end of the network. What about the core of the network where you get all of the accumulation heading back and heading out into the treatment stations or into the harbor or coming in from Pockwalk and needing more capacity from that end?
Right.
So I'm just going to jump in.
Okay.
We're going to defer that answer, Commissioner Russell, to item 4.5.
Okay. Beautiful.
Great question, though. Any other discussion or comments on the motion that the Halifax Water approve the filing with the URB, the capital project spending for last fiscal year?
Call for the question.
Call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Then we're on to item 4.5, update on timelines to the regional development chart, integrated resource plan, and rate application, because we want to talk about future planning.
Excellent.
If we want to have the verbal update, and then maybe we could answer Commissioner Russell's question from last item.
Right. So we have a short slide deck to go over some of the points there. And it will give a bit of an overview of some of the things that we're working on from future planning and some of the rate implications accordingly. And is Not sure if Lorna or Kara is sharing slides. There we go. Perfect. Thank you. So going to the first main slide. And so we have our regional development charge, which is something that we introduced initially back in 2014, had a later update in 2019. And it is set to collect charges at the building permit stage for the impact that units will have on our larger regional type infrastructure. So our water treatment plants, our transmission mains, major collection systems for wastewater and big pump stations. And so we were scheduled to go back to the Utility Review Board in October of 2025 with the next update. And it draws from the work that's done in our integrated resource plan and our infrastructure needs and that analysis. With the October 31st, 2025 update, we wanted to flag that we submitted our annual report to the board in June on the fiscal health, or what the status was of the regional development charge. And every year we have to do an analysis to see, has anything changed that would impact the charge by 15% plus or minus, and make adjustments. So a few things have happened since we did the last year's update. The provincial government introduced Section 236 in the bill, and that froze all of our development charges. So we were not able to upgrade or update any of those for at least 2 years. So that removed our ability to adjust for CPI this past April and this coming April. In addition, when we did our plus minus 15% review, we did notice that there was going to be an increase in the water charge, and because of the freeze of the RDC, not able to adjust that accordingly. The board was mindful that the RDC potentially could be underfunded, and it would not hit the rate base, but still wanting to make sure that the charges are allocated appropriately, and requested that we file instead of in October, but in March, so that any adjustments to the RDC could be effective in October when the freeze is lifted. So when we look to the earlier question from Commissioner Russell about current projects and larger projects and making sure that there's growth accommodations, we look at something like our water supply enhancement project, which will be spoken to later. And when we look at assigning growth costs for that, there is a projected increase of 76% to the water RDC as a result. When we did our analysis, the wastewater RDC was in keeping with normal adjustments and within the 15%. So as we start to work on making that March 31st, 2025 submission, we will be reaching out to the development community, the board's consultants, the consumer advocate, and any other interested stakeholders and parties to talk about what the regional development charge is going to look like. As well, we have to look at how we are collecting and structuring the non-residential charge within the regional development charge, which was a request from the board at the 2019 session. One significant piece, I'm probably going to just jump to the next slide and start talking about that, but our integrated resource plan, we will be starting that. We just are going through the request for proposal process and getting a consultant on board. But that infrastructure list, looking at growth, is what is needed to feed into the regional development charge. So the full integrated resource plan will not be done in time for the March 2025 update. And as such, we'll be relying on looking at the 2019 infrastructure list for growth, looking at what we're aware of for different growth nodes and growth areas, and how do we accommodate some of the future infrastructure needs for growth, and adding those into the regional development charge for the 2025 submission in March. So next slide, please. So the integrated resource plan, we did the first one in 2012, the second one in 2019. We're anticipating that this one will take approximately 2 years to do and get a final document in place for our 30-year projection. It's going to be looking at what are our infrastructure needs for asset renewal, compliance, and growth. Any of the asset renewal and compliance growth needs are what drives our rate with our customers and our capital programs to support our existing infrastructure. And then, as we noted, the growth aspects are peeled out, and those are collected through the regional development charge. And so the integrated resource plan, basically, when you look at it, fundamentally is the framework for all of our work that we do, from maintaining systems to replacing assets to making sure that the systems are adequate for growth. We will be continuing our conversations and meetings with HRM's regional planning team to look at the anticipated growth that they're seeing. We are going to be doing an extra analysis to the broader question on, we are seeing a large volume of growth, and as such, looking probably a layer above on what some of our regional infrastructure impacts are going to be. So going to the water sources from Pockwalk Lake Major, looking at our treatment plants and making sure that are they adequately going to be large enough for future growth, or do we have to start looking at alternative sources? So it's going to be a bit of a higher lens looked at what our needs are, but then also looking at the near term, what pipes do we have to replace, and what do we have to do in the next 30 years? And the board's consultants that we have engagement with through the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board. We had a staff workshop with them at the end of August, and it looked at a number of the design parameters. We had a good collaboration and good discussion with them on things that we're taking into consideration as we do a lot of our programs and our studies that are going to feed into the integrated resource plan and on the scope of the integrated resource plan itself. So there's a lot of work going on amongst the teams in making sure that we have everything well placed as we see the increase of growth throughout the municipality. I'm going to turn the next slide over to Louis on the general rate application, but I'm not sure if you want to pause for any questions on the growth stuff, or we can wait till the end. It's up to you.
Let's keep going with the verbal update, and then we'll take questions at the end.
So we have, as we expected, we are continuing to work on a rate application. Our anticipated file date with the Utility Review Board is into the fall of 2024. We typically, when we go for rates, we look at 2-year rates. We're hoping through this process to work with the Utility Review Board and present a slightly different strategy that would see us have a longer term rate with potentially a mechanism similar to what's built into the regional development charge. For if we need additional money, there's a reset or on a longer process, or a CPI type adjustment, which is built into the RDC charge. So we're hoping to develop that and bring that to the board in November. Part of our challenge will always be, how do we make sure we're engaging with our stakeholders? So that is a conversation that we'll be working on leading up to the presentation to the board in November.
Thank you, Kenda and Louis. Let's go to Commissioner Russell. Did that answer your question?
It starts to, yes. We will see how it goes with the rest of that discussion and development.
Okay. Commissioner O'Toole?
Thank you. Good information in this presentation. I'd encourage you to post it to the board package on the Halifax Water public website. My question is, through the 2-year period that it'll take to get the IRP done, what work will be progressing on demand side management and how is that going? Or will that have to wait until after the IRP is completed?
That's a good question because that was something that was requested in the last regional development charge update to the board. And we do have a project underway on demand side management and looking at what's going on. I'm not sure if there's anybody on the team that has a stronger update on the call on that, but we are engaging with a consultant and looking at some opportunities for demand side management because it will be a factor going forward.
Commissioner McPherson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kenda, has there been any consideration given, and I know you're not filing with the RDC until March, about the time horizon, the debate about whether 30 years is the right time frame or not, in light of what's been pretty explosive growth in Halifax in the last little while. And you'll recall from previous iterations of the charge, there's been questions about the accuracy of population statistics and the other inputs and the difficulty that you get into with going that far out. Any consideration to adjusting that?
That's a good question, and what I did fail to mention with the IRP, the Integrated Resource Plan, it looks at infrastructure needs for 30 years. But as you noted, when we did some iterations with UARB and the stakeholders on setting the regional development charge, we have the charges based on the 20-year infrastructure needs, partially out of concern of the ability to forecast for growth. I suspect as we start to write and make the application and get more feedback from the stakeholders and potentially HRM and how do we have, would they be looking at shorter timeframes for establishing the charge, or should there be shorter timeframes in looking at the infrastructure needs because of the pressures of growth? So it's something that is front of mind, but we're probably going to be seeking some input from some of those stakeholders as we get closer to filing the application.
Okay, thanks, Ken.
Any other questions on item 4.5? Thank you, Kenda, and I would agree with Commissioner O'Toole. That's a great presentation to put up on the website. Okay, item 5.1, Windsor Street Exchange redevelopment project. We have a verbal update.
Great, I can make the introduction here. Josh DeYoung, Director of Engineering and Capital Infrastructure. We have Jonathan McDonald, he's a manager in our infrastructure planning team, and he is going to give a brief update on this project that we're working through with HRM at the moment.
There we go. Morning, and thank you for the opportunity to give a quick presentation on this project. I want to go to the first slide, please. So just a bit of background. This, first and foremost, is an HRM-led project, and its main focus is to improve traffic control through the Windsor Street Exchange. HRM originally obtained funding through Transportation Canada and attained their regional council approval back in August of 2019, which prompted them to start their kickoff in March 2020. And around the same time, Halifax Water had initiated and completed some preliminary design work on 2 projects that are within the limits of the Windsor Street Exchange, namely the North End feeder replacement, which is an IRP project, and the Yonge Street sewer separation, which is also an IRP project. So it just happened to be coincidental that we were both working on projects at the same time in the same place. And HRM completed their functional design in around August of 2022 for the concept layout at the Windsor Street Exchange redevelopment. And it was at around that time we were invited to be more of a participant in the design and the discussions around that project, which started in August, I think, of last year, and it kind of continued into the spring of 2024. So next slide, please. So this fall, last fall, HRM proceeded with a progressive design build delivery model for the project delivery. So that would include continuation of their concept design into detailed design and hiring a design build team to take the project from concept to detailed design into project execution. So the concept design was endorsed by Regional Council in 2024. There was an RFQ process that was completed by HRM to pre-qualify design build contractors. And as a result of that pre-qualification process, they issued an RFP to those pre-qualified design build contractors. And as it stands right now, HRM was anticipating responses, I think, on the 20th, but I believe it was a couple of days later, but I believe they do have responses to that RFP in hand presently. So next slide, please. This is just a quick picture just to show the limits of the project. It doesn't show all of the limits because it's quite large, but just to give a sense of the scope and scale and size. It doesn't include, like I said, some of the Joe Howe ramp area where they will be doing work, but the bulk of the work would be right in the kind of the middle of the Windsor Street, Kempt Road area where and creating some 2 new lanes that would just bypass all the current traffic lights that would take you on and off the bridge right onto the Bedford Highway. So it's just a quick picture to show the scope. So next slide, please. So like I said before, the North End feeder replacement was a project that was looked at as part of our infrastructure or integrated resource plan. The North End feeder was installed in 74 and 75. It currently is our strongest water supply to the north end of Peninsular Halifax. It is in a tunnel at about a 50 to 115 foot depth that runs from Evans Avenue to Commission Street. It is a 900 millimeter prestressed concrete cylinder pipe. So it's that same vintage of pipe that we've had some issues with in certain areas with some water main breaks. So that is a concern for us. Halifax Water staff did a concept route study that was completed in 2019, and CBCL were retained after that concept study in 2020 for concept design development, detailed design, construction phase services. One of the goals of this project is to install the new pipe using conventional open cut as much as possible. So we will not be trying to bury it in a tunnel that's 100 feet deep. We'll be looking to put this pipe in normal depths anywhere from 10 to 12 feet at the most in most places. The project was identified in the 2019 IMP as part of the Peninsula Supply Strategy, whereas the recommendation from that IRP was to twin this high-risk portion of the North End feeder that's in the tunnel, and it's not easily accessible or repairable. If you want to just go to the next slide. So this just gives an overall snapshot of the North End feeder in its current and what we're proposing in red. So the current alignment you'll see is the kind of the thicker blue line. The tunnel piece is right at the start of our red line on the left-hand side of the picture. And like I said, it proceeds in a tunnel where there's a shaft kind of halfway through that tunnel in the parking lot of the Port Authority lands, and it continues up Lady Hammond where it comes out of the shaft and continues down Commission Street towards the Roby Reservoir. So the concept alignment that was the routing that was done in 2019 looked at a bunch of different options, and the one that was selected as the most preferred route was the one in red, where it would come down the bank off Evans Avenue, cross the Bedford Highway, through the Port lands, and once you get to the bottom of Bain Street, that's the piece that we are looking to work with HRM to coordinate our design and installation through their project. Next slide, please. So the next piece of what we're looking to integrate with HRM is the Yonge Street sewer separation, which is also an IRP project. This was also, so the Yonge Street pocket in red is the growth intensification area that was identified through their IRP planning process, and that's kind of the block of Windsor, Almond, Roby, and Yonge. We retained WSP consultants that helped us with identifying what would be a preferred stormwater route. The IRP, as part of its recommendations for development and allowing growth, recommended the sewer be separated in that Yonge Street pocket because it currently is all combined within the pocket itself, and to do so would require an upgrade of this stormwater feeder that runs currently along Windsor Street, Kempt Road down to the Windsor Street Exchange, through the Windsor Street Exchange, and ultimately tying into some existing infrastructure down in the port. So that's kind of that orange alignment. So it's the same kind of idea as the North End feeder. It runs right smack through the middle of the Windsor Street Exchange project. So it would be advantageous for Halifax Water and HRM to work together and install at least a portion of this work as part of their overall plan. So next slide, please. And this just shows a quick snapshot of the existing wastewater and stormwater infrastructure. So like I said, we're going to look to upsize and improve stormwater conveyance through the Windsor Street Exchange area. All of the kind of the lightly colored blue is the stormwater system, and right now it's just a maze of pipes and network of catch basins. So part of what we will try to do is optimize that, reduce the number of manholes, probably reduce the number of pipes, just to simplify things from our operations standpoint. We'll also at the same time look at reviewing the wastewater and the combined system size, and depending on what we're seeing from HRM staff, we can adjust the size as required if we have to allow some additional capacity through the Windsor Street Exchange, because that would be the time to do it. Next slide, please. So part of the benefits of integration with HRM is we have a regular program that we do every year for asset renewal. So it is a common practice within Halifax to integrate on water main renewal, storm water main renewals, and wastewater main renewals. There are cost savings to both Halifax Water and HRM in terms of streetscape reinstatement. A lot of times we share the cost in reinstating streets where we're going to be digging up and to replace pipes. There's also benefits for traffic control, mobilization, contractor overheads, and project management. So it just makes sense to integrate on some of these projects so that we're not doing the same project twice. As we worked with HRM staff, there was the bylaw S300. That is what they call the order of the engineer. So we've essentially received a letter saying that, okay, if we cannot participate in the project at this time, we won't be able to start any future projects on the North End feeder and the Windsor Street and the Kempt Road stormwater upgrades until 2030, because that would give time for HRM to complete their project plus a 2 or 3 moratorium on any kind of major street cuts on their new road infrastructure. Next slide, please. So part of our next steps that we're working on currently is we will be making an application to the UARB for design funding in the amount of approximately $3.5 million. So that would be for a combination of the North End feeder concept and detailed design that we've been working on, the Yonge Street sewer separation concept and detailed design that we've also been working on, and there's also a number of, we call it the Windsor Street Exchange design. So that would be some of the optimization of our water, wastewater, and stormwater network within that Windsor Street Exchange project. We're going to continue our design process. We're working with consultants for developing the design for the North End feeder that's outside the limits of the Windsor Street Exchange for both North End feeder and the Yonge Street sewer separation. And we're also actively participating in the design build process once HRM has a successful proponent as part of their RFP process. And I think that's it for the presentation. So if there's any questions.
Thank you, Josh and Jonathan. That's very complex.
Yeah.
As a commuter, though, I highly appreciate the collaboration between HRM and Halifax Water. Any questions from the board for Josh or Jonathan?
Josh, I have one. Josh, the Joe Howe Drive loop, it's not really part of the Windsor Street Exchange. What consideration did this project have in reconsidering how that is being managed currently?
I'm going to defer to Jonathan in case anything came up in conversations on the project specifically with HRM. I'm not aware of anything related to Joe Howe Loop.
I think, yeah, like I said, this is an HRM-led project, and it's wasn't really shown on the picture because it doesn't do it any justice. But I believe some of the preliminary plans for that area are widening or adding a lane from like from the Bedford Highway down around.
Okay.
But that would be part of like the HRM-led project. It doesn't really impact much of Halifax water infrastructure in that area other than
Okay.
relocating some stormwater catch basins.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Seeing no more questions. Thank you, Josh and Jonathan. Item 5.2, Water
you.
Supply Enhancements Program, a verbal update.
Yes, I have Sanjeev Tegra, our senior manager on strategic projects, is going to join us and walk us through a brief update on the water supply enhancement program. See the slideshow popping up. So go ahead, Sanjeev.
Oh, thank you. Everybody can hear me okay?
Go ahead, Sanjeev.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining for an update on the Water Supply Enhancement Program. Next slide, please. Many of you might recall, or there are some new board members as well, so I'll provide a brief summary. So the Water Supply Enhancement Program is our program to upgrade our two regional water supply plants, which is the J.D. Klein Water Supply Plant and Lake Major. It contains 13 projects, 9 at J.D. Klein and 4 at Lake Major. And those projects are to be executed over the next 10 years. And there are significant projects, and there are going to be, I guess, generational changes to the plant. So one of the first projects that we seek approval for, or some early works approval for, was the pre-treatment and clarification project at J.D. Klein. If we go to the next slide, please. So back last year in March, we came to the board seeking approval for some early works of that project in the range of 7.3 million. So the board had approved it, and the scope of that work was around Skeratow relocation, getting the site ready to put the new DAF infrastructure or the clarification infrastructure. And then we were going to pre-purchase some pipe work and then continue on to do our detailed design work. So that was the scope that was approved back in March, after which we went to the utility and review board, and we were successful in getting the approval to proceed on those 4 items. So if we go to our next slide. So our plan at that time was the stuff that you see in beige, kind of colored, is the new plant that we were going to bolt onto the old infrastructure or the old plant. So this included new, basically in rough terms, like the first half of the plant was going to be bolted on to the second half of the plant. Some very high civil works, very big pipe work to connect the new plant to the old plant. So we took the design as far as preliminary design with our model to upgrade the plant in such manner. And if we go to the next slide, please. However, then we did some kind of constructability review, and there were some risks that we saw with our current plan, which was our current plan required big pipe work and abandonment of clear wells in our existing plant. It would also mean that we would be running the plant at half or less capacity. So the existing plant will be running and operating while we do this massive infrastructure upgrade within the plant. There's also the single transmission main that goes from the plant to the city, which is very near, and we would have been blasting close to the transmission main. Clear well isolation, the way the plant is set up, it's not an ideal setup, and it is very hard to isolate sections of the plant, and the gates that are there haven't been operated in decades. So that provides a very challenging situation. And if we start to operate those gates, there are water quantity and quality issues that we see. Also, bolting on a new solution to an old plant presents challenges in terms of what we might want to do in future for adding additional infrastructure or adding in additional processes. We need to backwash our filters, and we weren't able to come up with good, realistic ways to properly address that. Also, we did see that going down this path could open us to a lot of unknowns because we would be doing work at an existing facility, and there is a risk of a lot of unknowns and hence change orders that could come from the contractor around during the construction period. And then we were up against our property boundary as well. And then the boil water, which will be discussed later, that comes into the equation as well. As you're trying to operate a plant while it's running, while you do this invasive operation on the plant. So this could lead to future boil water advisories, or there is a chance of that. So those are all the risk items that we saw. So what we did was, if we go to our next slide, please, we got our consultants and consulting team to look at a completely brand new plant, kind of northeast of the existing plant. So if you see the bottom of the screen, just slightly to the left is where we have our existing plant. And what you see in the red shaded area is our new plant. And then the green side is what we were planning to put on earlier. And the red side is what we are proposing brand new, which is a new filters, new chemical feed areas, all that. So this gives us a new plant idea. So what this does is we can put a new plant on the same site without altering any of the operations that are happening at the existing plant while we operate that. And then it also gives us a new modernized building rather than keeping half of the plant or complete of the old 50-year-old envelope of the plant and trying to work with that. So, and then it gives us the capability to add feature enhancements to the plant as we go along, and we can be strategic about doing different phases or adding additional treatment processes to this new plant, because that'll be already in our vision of how we want to execute that. So if we go to our next slide, please. So in terms of, and these are very high level costs and analysis that our consultant did. So the line that you see in orange is if we follow our existing plan of bolting on a new half new plant to the old plant, we start, and that's just one of the projects. So that starts at about $131 million in capital investment today. However, in about 9 to 12 years, we will need to do a massive upgrade to our filters because they will remain as old. So we would have to do that upgrade, which right now is costed around about 80 million. So that takes our life cycle costing to in the range of $326 million. If we do our plan, do the old plant, bolt on, then do another major upgrade in about 10 months. However, if we go with a new plant right from the get-go, it is an initial investment. There's a delta of about 100 million initially. However, you end up around $350 million of life cycle costs. So over the 25 years, on a very high level analysis, the numbers are within 25 million of each other. So at this level, we are calling it's a wash between the two options of which option to go with from a financial standpoint. So those are the two options that we have right now. So we fully appreciate that at a higher level. We had a workshop, a detailed workshop with our consultants along with the whole executive team last week, where the general sense from the team was that in order to supply water reliably and have a resilient plant, it is in the best interest, or that's what the group feels, is to go forward and go look at a new plant. So if we go to the next slide, please. So yeah, that's the workshop top that we see. So we had that workshop where we told our consultants, yes, we do see the value in having a new plant, but there should be a detailed analysis done. Right now, it's a high level analysis. We agree on a concept that is a new plant does make sense. However, we would like to document everything in terms of how we migrated from our old plant to new plant. What are the risks that we considered? What are the treatment technologies that we have considered so far? And we are also looking at optimizing between projects between JD Klein and Lake Major. So in order to balance the cash a little bit between the two facilities, are there projects at Lake Major that we perhaps have the ability to delay and upgrade or put more money towards JD Klein? So that's the report we have got our consultants working on now. We are due to provide an update to the Utility and Review Board in about 3 weeks as well, where we will be providing them this high-level analysis from our consultants, which provides and recommends proceeding with a new plan and looking more deeply into it. And then we will be providing ongoing updates to the Halifax Water Board as well as we move along the process. I believe that is the last slide, and we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Sanjeev. That was a very detailed and helpful update. Any questions from the board members? Go ahead, Commissioner McPherson.
I'll defer to Commissioner O'Toole first, and then I can ask my question.
Go ahead, Commissioner O'Toole. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you, Commissioner McPherson. You didn't have to do that, but I wanted to thank Sanjeev and staff for the presentation. I think items 5.1 and 5.2 today in this board package are probably the most important strategic things in front of the board. And I think having these presentations added to the public website would be really useful. With respect to 5.2 and what's recommended for JD Klein, my question is how quickly the next piece of work to solidify the go forward approach will progress. I ask that question because I anticipate there will be federal, provincial funding opportunities that this would be a very eligible and attractive project for, and would like us to be ready that we can apply for funding.
Yeah, I can answer that. So in terms of timelines, Commissioner O'Toole, we are looking at Our next update to UARB is due next month. However, the wholesome report and solidifying that decision, we are looking to have a final report on that by January 15th.
Thank you.
Commissioner McPherson?
Okay, thank you, and thank you for that report. My question relates to, I guess, either option, new plant or a bolt-on, if you can call it that, to the old plant. Do either of them impact the capacity of the plant? And I ask that question in the context of future growth, population growth, and those types of things, or is it really an adjustment of the treatment processes to get a better quality for what's produced now?
Yeah, there is a portion of the growth that is accounting for in the new plants. It's a counterintuitive. So when the plant in 1977 that is in operation right now, when that was built, they built it for 220 million liters per day. And right now we see 90 million liters per day leaving the plant. And however, this plant would never be able to do 220 because the water quality has changed so drastically from when the plant was originally designed to the current day water quality, along with the limitations of design, which at that time we thought, oh yeah, the design would work. So this plant can technically right now do a maximum of about 125 MLD. The new plants that we are designing are in the range of 150 MLD, rough numbers. There is another component added to that, which is how much will Nova Scotia Environment allow us to take out of the lake as well. So right now, our permit is an average daily demand of 113 MLD. So our next discussion, we are doing our safe field analysis, and our next discussion with Nova Scotia Environment is around that portion as well, in terms of presenting that information and see what the max they would allow us to take out of the lake.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kent?
Yeah, thank you. Sanjeev, I just wanted to say, as a member of the board who doesn't have the scope of really diving into what really is happening, and we rely on these presentations, I want to tell you how much I enjoyed this presentation. I found that your approach to it was very worthwhile in a way that was more average Joe kind of talk about it. And I know that that may not mean the same to some of the other board members, and that's fine. But sometimes I get lost in the detail of some of these presentations around such important, as Kathy noted, so important to the work that we're doing. And I don't really have a question. I just wanted to commend you on how you presented and what you presented. It was very helpful for me to be able to conclude whether or not I can support it. So thank you for that.
Oh, really appreciate your words. Thank you.
Kenda?
Yes, I just want to circle back just to Commissioner O'Toole's comments about financing opportunities. We had a meeting with Municipal Affairs on Friday and started to get a list of possible projects, and we did flag that this potentially could be one. So we're going to be staying in tune, and we'll probably be phoning our friends at HRM to help with some of these funding applications to see if there's opportunities to benefit from that. So stay tuned. You may hear from us.
Always good to phone a friend. And well done, Sanjeev. I echo Commissioner Kent's comments.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody's time.
Okay, moving on. Item 5.3. We have a motion to be put on the floor.
Oops, I can do that motion if you like.
Go ahead, Vice Chair.
It's recommended that the Halifax Water Board direct the acting general manager to request that Halifax Regional Council, one, excuse me, authorize the Halifax Regional Water Commission to operate the Cogswell District Energy System within the non-mandatory connection zone as depicted in Figure 2 of this report, in addition to the existing mandatory connection zone. 2, direct the mayor to write a letter to the province of Nova Scotia requesting legislative amendments to the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter and Halifax Regional Water Commission Act to A, expand the boundary of the Cogswell District Energy System to include the non-mandatory connection zone depicted in Figure 2 of this report. Authorize the municipality to pass bylaws with respect to both the mandatory and non-mandatory connection zones. And C, extend the application of Halifax Water's statutory limitations of liability to the provision of incidental business, including district energy services.
I can second that.
Commissioner Russell to second. Thank you for that. I just have a question on point of order. Can the Halifax Water Board direct the mayor? Or is this a request the mayor?
I will defer to Commissioner O'Toole and or Rebecca, but we've been coordinating this for a bit, so.
I
So-
understand
Yes.
the item, but I just question the
Yes.
wording. Commissioner O'Toole, if you could help us?
Maybe,
Yes,
Request.
so we have a council report going on October 1st, subject to this report being approved by the Halifax Water Board, where the recommendation in that one would be for council to direct the mayor. The language in this one should probably say the Halifax Water Board requests that regional council direct the mayor. That's the way we would word similar things coming from, for instance, the Board of Police Commissioners to council, where a board is making a request for council to direct the mayor to do something.
Seeing that, I would think that would be considered a friendly amendment to change direct to request.
Oh,
Just
go ahead.
if you read the top, I think there's a few people trying to chime in on this.
Oh, sorry.
The motion is the Halifax Water Board direct me to request Halifax Regional Council to direct the mayor. So I think that sounds okay and aligns with the report that Regional Council has on for the agenda.
Yep, that works.
Okay, thank you.
We will go forward and no change to the motion on the floor required. Any discussion on this item?
And we do have staff available if you want an overview.
Go ahead, Commissioner Russell.
Thank you very much. The CAO mentioned that it's coming on October, or that the report is coming on October 1st. I was wondering if there was a timeliness aspect of this required. CAO, will that report that's coming address the timeliness aspect?
Yes, that's why we're putting it on October 1st.
Okay, thank you.
That's our last council meeting with this council, so.
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner McPherson.
Thank you. I totally support the motion. I think it is something that's obviously, with the evolution of the district energy system, is needed to address very much a real world problem. The question I have is, I know when the district energy system utility was set up, pardon me, there was still a lot of development going on in terms of the system itself. And at the UARB, I think there were some questions about the capacity of the system. While obviously the system can't serve something that's not within the boundary, has the analysis of the capacity moved forward? In other words, if you expand the boundary, will the utility be able to service it?
And I think we'll
That's a
defer
good
to
seg-
James. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good segue. We've got James Chisholm here from our district energy team, as well as Jeff Knapp, if any other questions arise. James is a project engineer on the team, and pretty confident he can clarify some of the questions here.
Yeah, certainly. So we have, yes, with our consulting engineer, we have looked at the capacity that we'll be able to get in the energy center, and we'll have ample capacity to serve customers outside of the existing boundary. That's all based also on the land use bylaw that is currently being studied by HRM, which will determine the maximum building heights that are able to be built within the mandatory connection zone. But with what our model is looking at right now, we don't expect to see buildings in excess of what we're currently planning for. We may actually see it go down the other way where gross floor area and energy use intensities increase the amount of available energy for non-mandatory connections.
Thanks, James. And I might have just a follow-up, and without getting too deep in the weeds on this, but that modeling includes those winter days when the ambient temperature isn't as high. I think the UARB hearing said it was 4 or 5 days a year you might not be able to meet capacity.
Yes, that's
in the current boundary.
That's exactly right. And as we move forward with this, there would be, as we develop the rules and regulations, there may be interruptible service for non-mandatory customers should that arise. But that's something that'll be worked out in the future as we set rates and the rate structures, as well as the regulations that'll accompany them.
Okay, thank you.
That's a very detailed question, Commissioner McPherson.
Well, Madam Chair, I have some passing involvement with the district energy.
Thank you for the answer, James. Any other questions from the floor? Okay, we have a motion as shown on the screen. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Okay, moving on. Item 6, corporate governance manual and signing authority guidelines. I have a motion to be put on the floor. Oh, Josh, do you have something?
Nope, I was just going to thank the staff that joined us for appreciate the presentations and the amount of effort that goes into them preparing to do these presentations. I think you see a quick glimpse of 6 or 7 slides, but I can attest to the efforts that they put in to get to this point. So I'd like to thank James, Jonathan, and Sanjeev, and Jeff, I know, is in the background there. So I appreciate what's been done. And I think we take some good comments away from the board commissioner members here that we can use in the future.
Thank you, Josh. Excellent interjection. Well done to your team, and thank you for all the efforts. Okay, item 6, we have a motion to be put on the floor. Do I have someone to move that?
I'll move that, Madam Chair. I move the Halifax Water Board approve approve amendments to the corporate governance manual as shown in attachment A, and 2, authorize the general manager to oversee and update the signing authority guidelines as a corporate operational policy. So moved.
Commissioner McClellan
Second,
will second. Is there a presentation?
Yes, there is, and I can get started on that if we pull that up, just to guide some of the conversations, because I know sometimes some of these amendments might need some conversation and clarity. There we go. And I believe Lorna may have added it to the package as well in case people are still having issues. So anyway, so we'll get started. So thank you. And we have the corporate governance manual, as you're well aware of. And what we're recommending is what we see are a couple of housekeeping items to get some clarity around some of the things that we need to have in place and allow for a bit more fluidity in how we have some votes and everything on some projects. So next slide, please. So that's the motion, and we'll go to the next slide, please. And so basically, the intention here is to clarify some of the process around calling of special meetings, as well as facilitating e-voting. We've seen a couple of instances this last construction season whereby we had to go back to this board in order to advance a follow-up report for additional funding to the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board. And if we were to wait for the next scheduled meeting, we weren't going to make our deadlines and probably miss the construction season. The language in the current governance manual speaks to framework around quorum, as well as potential for using telephones and such for doing meetings, but this just allows a bit more clarity to enable what we would consider an e-vote. And so that's the intention around there. When the other aspect is to remove the restrictions on ability to abstain. Some of the issues there based on if a commissioner feels that they're in conflict of an issue, they can remove themselves from the meeting, and there's no necessity to call for abstentions. They simply don't vote. And we'll go on the next. Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead too quick. The other piece is to clarify some of the powers and responsibilities around the general manager. And we have, I'll speak to it on a later slide, but also a signing authority document and why we're looking for some changes there. And I do want to note that as we talk about all of these policies and changes, they are all in keeping with other policies that oversee procurement and capital and operational spending. So next slide, please. So I did touch on special meetings and e-voting. And so there are instances where we may have to call for a special meeting. We had those circumstances present themselves this past summer when we had to address the boil water advisory. And also, as I noted, with some of the tenders that came in over the approved budget amount that we had to go back to the Utility Review Board. So essentially, it's just giving a bit more flexibility to the board to have the meeting and for the chair to call that. Next slide. And then, as I noted, the abstentions. Basically, if you do perceive that you may have a conflict with an issue, you can remove yourself from the meeting and the voting on that motion. And essentially, the way everything is structured, that motions are simply carried by the majority of the votes. So just removing the abstention piece would just kind of give a bit more clarity, and it seems to be a bit of what I guess would be an unnecessary aspect. Next slide. So there's a number of highlights that we're just trying to get some clarity into the governance manual itself. They are fundamentally based on the authorities similar that are provided through the charter to the CAO. And there are 9 recommendations here. If there's anyone in particular that you want to talk to in any more detail, but it's simply just giving clarity to the general manager and the executive team and to the board themselves. And next slide, please. And we have a signing authority document that was initially approved by the board in 2019 and later updated in 2021. It has a hierarchy, I guess, of approvals for signing authority by different levels of staff for their daily activities. And it's all based on documents. So it can range from entering into an employee contract, or it could be signing an approval on a development application. And so the way it's structured right now, that document has to come back to this board to get adjusted. And as we look at the creation of different jobs and job titles, or different documents, it would require us to go back to this board to make those adjustments. And so as we were getting prepared to bring an updated version of this signing authority document to this board, there was reflection on the ability just to simply allow for the general manager to exercise the rights that are bestowed upon the general manager through the board, and the regulations on establishing the appropriate signing authority guidelines for the staff that report through to the general manager ultimately. So, and again, everything is in keeping with other corporate policies that may speak to financial signing authorities. And next slide, I think that might be it. And I don't know if Louis or Rebecca have anything else to offer on this topic, and if not, we'll take some questions if there are any.
I don't have anything else to add, Kendra.
Thank you.
I don't have any.
Any questions from the board for Kenda, Louis, or Rebecca? Go ahead, Commissioner Russell.
Thank you. This is about the abstentions, and I'm just, what I heard was that someone would have to remove themselves from the meeting in order to abstain from voting. Would that be more cumbersome? And then they would have to rejoin after the vote to continue with the meeting. Would that be more cumbersome than simply asking for an abstention? I could certainly understand that there would be a challenge if they stayed in the meeting and didn't vote. I've often seen that as a vote in the positive, but that could be left open to interpretation. So if someone does really abstain, is removing themselves from the meeting the best option?
Right. And I don't know, Rebecca, if you have anything to offer there, but I think that it's framed up that you're voting yay and nay, and then there'd be the tally of those votes. Defer maybe to Rebecca on whether, or Louis, if there's the need to officially leave the meeting, or if you just stay silent during the voting process.
Based on Robert's Rules of Order, to abstain from a vote, you don't need to remove yourself from the meeting, the discussion. You just cannot, or you would abstain from.
Just
I couldn't hear what you said.
Sorry, I was just saying, based on the Robert's Rules of Order, which is what we follow in our corporate governance manual, if you're abstaining from a vote, you do not have to remove yourself from the meeting during the discussion. You would just abstain from voting.
So that puts more onus on the person who is recording the meeting to make sure that everybody did positively vote yes. In practice, what we have seen when we're voting by hand at council or in some committee meetings is it is generally assumed that unless someone votes no, they're voting yes. And I just wanted to make sure that that was recognized as being different in this case. So I guess that would be my biggest concern. Thank you.
You have a comment, Rebecca?
So typically how how Colleen has been asking is if anyone says agrees, and then there are any disagreements, and if anyone has abstained. So an abstainment isn't a negative vote. It's
a non-vote. Yeah.
So maybe I'm not understanding.
I just, if I can, in the current governance manual, it says the commissioners may only abstain from a vote in a case of a conflict of interest. So there are no other opportunities to abstain. This removes that. So if a commissioner had another reason to abstain, they can certainly do that.
I appreciate that. That is, I think, different from the mechanics of voting itself. If we have 10 people in a meeting in person and we are voting by hand, and 8 people hold up their hand, and nobody holds up their hand for, 8 people hold up their hand for a yay vote, nobody holds up their hand for a nay vote, we assume that all 10 have been voting in the affirmative.
Yeah,
And in this case, you're saying that that would be different, that it would be a positive, 2 abstentions, and no nays.
Or in the case of what we do here, right, I ask all 3 questions, and so people would voice or raise their hand at any abstentions, so we would be able to record that. And then with these updates to the governance manual, it would align with what we're already doing, because right now it says you can only abstain if you've notified a conflict of interest to the chair, and we want the ability for someone to abstain when they see it appropriate, and we would record it.
And I guess
Does
I'm
that help?
misreading, I guess I might be misreading that about, again, the mechanics of abstaining. I'll have another look at that. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner McClellan, you had your hand up?
Yes, I was just going to add to the point about conflict of interest. I think that's the distinction that folks are making, is that this is a chance for folks to abstain when it's not a conflict of interest, but there's some other rationale. So that was all. I think the point was already made. Thank you.
Any other questions on the motion? Okay, the motion is on the floor. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Okay, last item for today, item 6I was moved forward into other business as item 7, the Pockwalk Boil Order Advisory Investigation. As noted previously, the board did have a special meeting in July on the matter, and we did want to bring it forward here for any follow-up discussion. It should be noted that the report is also available on the Halifax Water website for anyone who's interested in seeing that. So I'll bring forward item 7. If did you want to present anything, Kenda, or do you want to open the floor for questions?
I think we'll just open the floor if there are specific questions. We do have Wendy Krakozik, who was involved in the development of the report. We can take any specific questions that the board may have.
Great. Welcome, Wendy. Are there any questions from the board on the incident report? So I had a couple. So first of all, on behalf of the board, we want to thank the Halifax Water team for their prompt and fulsome response to the incident of July 1st. Halifax Water, prides itself on reliable delivery of water services and understands the impact that this service interruption may have on our customers. And as well, the transparency and thoroughness of this report is really appreciated, as the board was interested in the event as well as the implementation of improvements for the future. So I had 2 questions. One, can you elaborate on the discussions between Halifax Water and NSECC that resulted in the issuance of the Boil Water Advisory?
Sure. So I can take that. So on the afternoon when this occurred, it is a loss of primary disinfection is a requirement for a boil water advisor in our approval to operate. Where this is such a large impact, we contacted Nova Scotia Environment through our normal reporting processes, and then escalated it through contacts at Nova Scotia Environment in order to reach someone directly to be able to have the conversation and engage their health staff as well ahead of issuing the boil water advisory.
Thank you for that, Wendy. And my second question was, I really appreciated the list of 16 recommendations. That's easy to follow, and we can see that many of them are short term and expected to be completed in 6 months. You've indicated some are ongoing. Can you sort of characterize your progress to date with sort of 6 months upcoming?
Yes, so I think the ones that are ongoing, some of them were we were able to do temporary solutions in the very short term to improve the situation, and then we're working on the permanent solutions in the short or in the medium and longer term. So things like the generator, for instance, there's a long lead time on that type of generator. And so we were able to, and we actually had one on site prior to the event that was to be installed, so a temporary one, and we are now in the process of procuring a permanent generator. So there's a few along that line that were sort of initially addressed as a temporary solution and then went to a permanent solution. In terms of, there's a few electrical ones that are ongoing as well, and I do believe there's some consultants engaged to do some of the analysis for those. In terms of the longer term ones at the end, Sanjeev earlier touched upon the water supply enhancement program, and that is he focused mainly on the replacement of the plant and the need for the plant upgrades, but he also mentioned that there were additional projects as part of that program, and some of those projects are what are listed here in these fundamental design constraints, and so those are within that water supply enhancement program. So in particular, number 16 there, addressing the fundamental design constraints for treated water storage. So that's been identified as an issue, and we are going to be going to the OERB shortly for funding to install or build a new reservoir on site to both enhance the amount of water that we have available at the plant to help with system storage, but also to ensure that that water is chlorinated prior to that storage, so we're not in this situation again. So that's been an ongoing project for a while, and we'll be going to the OERB shortly.
Thank you for that. And if we could make a request from the board that these follow-up items be updated and reported through the enterprise risk subcommittee of the board would be very helpful for the board going forward. Any other questions from the board members? Go ahead, Commissioner O'Toole.
Thank you. Not a question, but a comment arising from your question, Chair Rawlings, around the emergency alerting. Just as a bit of an update, there is a committee of CAOs around the province who are working with the new provincial emergency management department on the topic of emergency alerting. And one of the things that has been identified is there are some provinces, for example, Alberta is really a best practice, well established in emergency alerting. But boil water advisories are probably the grayest area and the most tricky area when it comes to emergency alerting. And one of the things that's been identified by the provincial folks and the municipal folks who are sitting around that table is need to develop more detailed criteria and guidelines to help people assess when to use an intrusive versus a non-broadcast intrusive type of alert. And we'll be working with Halifax Water closely on the boil water advisory topic, because one of the triggers right now for these intrusive alerts has to be that there's an imminent threat to life or private property. That is a difficult call to make when you've got an issue such as happened during the summer, where it wasn't an imminent threat to life. It was just water that didn't have enough chlorine in it.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Toole. Well, thank you for those efforts on behalf of Halifax Water, and as well as the context. That would be very helpful for all to have access to that alert system. Okay, I believe that brings us to the end of today's agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Commissioner Russell. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.